great to be here. I know there's 4,000 things you could be doing right now, and you're stuck with me for a few minutes. I have Ariel or somebody singing up here in the monitor. Can you hear this? A little disconcerting. I have like the greatest job on earth. I get to go into the parks thanks to the goodness of Disney at all hours of day and night. I've been in the Disney World kingdoms, I think, 26 or 27 times when the parks are shut down. And I've gone on rides at 5 in the morning, and they bring the cast members in and they let me walk the ride. Sometimes it takes 2 to 3 hours to walk something like Expedition Everest. And then I go home and start writing furiously about what scared the heck out of me while I was in these places. And that's really what ends up being the Kingdom Keepers. When we first sort of thought up this idea, I said, you know, the only way I can do this is if you give me full access to your parks. And they went, oh, what? We don't give full access to our parks. But Wendy Lefton, my editor, took out a magic sword and cut some people off at the knees and eventually got me the permission. So I've just had this amazing, amazing opportunity to go in and see things that certainly I had never seen. Many of you may know about them or have seen them, but to be able to get in there and see crazy stuff, some of which they'll say, now you never can tell anyone about that, much less write about it. You never can tell anyone about that. For my crime novels, one time I went in, I was a guest of the FBI, and I was in the WMFO, Washington Metropolitan Field Office, and they gave me this big tour of the FBI headquarters, which was in a place called Buzzard Point, really sort of desolate area. And the very end of the tour, this is your taxpayer dollars at work, the very end of the tour, we reached a bank vault, you know, the big, huge stainless steel thing with the wheel on it. And the guy said, turn around, and he put in some code and spun the wheel, opened it up, and there was a man sitting at a table with a light bulb over his head and a phone on the table. And then he swung the thing shut and said, I can't tell you about that. And that's the kind of thing that Disney's been so wonderful to do for me. You have to imagine, those of you who know anything about the Kingdom Keepers, what if there was someone here today intent on sabotaging D23 and destroying all of our fun? What would we do about it? And that's what happens in the Kingdom Keepers, every book. You get into the book, and there are, in fact, the Disney villains, and they are intent on corrupting the magic within the parks, sort of bringing down the kingdoms. And a lot of this came about because Walt Disney, in his just incredible genius, in taking fairy tales and some European stories and bringing them into his own world, created some terrific villains. And they, as an experiencer of the Disney universe, I always felt that the villains got kind of short shrift. They didn't get much ink, they didn't get much airtime. Sometimes they were almost comical, so that if we were very young, they didn't terrify us, but they terrified me. And when I got this opportunity to write the Kingdom Keepers, I thought, to heck with this. I get to play with the Disney villains, so I'm going to make them terrifying. And the Kingdom Keepers end up going up against these Disney villains. The Kingdom Keepers are 5 teenagers, Finn and Charlene and Philby and Maybeck and Willa. And they are brought into Disney originally as models for DHI, which are hologram hosts. You know, at the time I was first touring Disney, they had the buttons for Pal Mickey. Do any of you guys remember that? And I think Pal Mickey was like this little puppet, and you'd get to a certain place, and a radio would trigger him, and he'd go, hey, Ridley, you know, this is really cool over here. And I thought, you know, we need to update that. You need to walk into the park with your button on, and a hologram pops up and says, Mr. Pearson, can I show you to the Haunted Mansion? I said, that's my kind of Disney. So that's where this all came from, and that they would need these teenage hosts, and therefore would have models, and then something goes crazily wrong, they think, with the hardware and software, and these kids go to sleep at night and they wake up as their holograms in the kingdoms. So who are these kids? The 5 kids are, wait, I need my little button. I'm waiting for all of this to happen automatically and nothing's happening. The 5 kids are unique in that they solve things as a group. And that's something that comes out of my days. I was originally a musician. I was on the road as a musician for 11 years. And I wrote most of the music, but I would notice, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks after we had rehearsed a song that it was sounding awfully good. And I would realize that no one was playing the part that I originally wrote. They had all bailed on my version of the song and they were doing it their own way. And the Kingdom Keepers are much the same way. They all have individual skills. Maybeck is kind of this strong, cocky kid, but you can really count on him. Finn is designated as a leader, but he's a reluctant leader. He's a sensitive kid. He's a terrific friend to have. Willa is extremely bright, but quiet and reserved. Charlene is athletic and pretty and kind of, you know, the woohoo in every event, but internally a little bit insecure. And then there's this guy named Philby. And Philby, to me, is one of the more complex Kingdom Keepers because he's really bright, he's really capable, he's really able. But as the writer, I never quite know what Philby's up to. And I never quite fully trust the kid. And that has continued on and on as I've written the book. I've written 6 of the books, and I'm in the process right now of writing the 7th. The first 5, have any of you read them, or have all of you? That's what I'm talking about. So, you know, for those of you who don't know, the 5 or 6 go something like this. The first book really focuses around this thing called the Stonecutter's Quill, which is a fable left by Walt, and the kids have to solve it. And they realize that the Overtakers, the Disney villains, are not these sweet guys, that they're really something to reckon with. The second book takes place in Animal Kingdom. The Kingdom Keepers lose a friend and really have to team up because a clock is running on this missing friend. The third takes place in Epcot, which is just such a cool park. I've really fallen in love with Epcot through all the research I've done there. And in Epcot, some of the magic starts to permeate the Kingdom Keepers world. There's a magic sword. Some of the rides go a little bit nuts. Gigabyte, a snake from one of the shows, turns out to be real and chases them across the park. And when you're there touring, which I've done many times, prior to people coming in, if you want, as a guest, and I think you have to book this like 9 years in advance, but you can tour Epcot as a family on Segways. So at about 7:15, we would see these families bombing through the park on their Segways, you know. And I thought, ooh, because as I ran into Test Track and saw the crash test dummies sitting there, I thought, wait, I'm the guy who brought the dolls alive in Small World. I can definitely bring the crash test dummies alive. So I envisioned the crash test dummies on Segways chasing the kids across the park. And that's what happened in the third book. In the fourth book, it goes into Disney Hollywood Studios. All of this is still in Disney World. And some of the good Disney characters begin to get on board and help out the Kingdom Keepers, which was really fun for me and will continue in this 7th book that we're writing now. And then the 5th and 6th books took place because I had envisioned for years that I needed to get the Kingdom Keepers from the East Coast, Disney World, to here in the West Coast, Disneyland. And I had wanted to do that by Disney on Ice. I wanted them to kind of skate their way. But Disney wouldn't let me do that at the time. There were licensing problems, and it didn't work out. So my editor and I were, you know, we can't FedEx these guys. How are we going to get them there? And I co-wrote a series of books with a brilliant guy named Dave Barry called Peter and the Starcatchers. And,
oh yeah!
And as a treat, Disney brought Dave and I on a Disney cruise. And I was having a meal with a marketing director and the captain and some people. And I mentioned this thing about the ice deal not working out, the Disney on Ice. And this wonderful woman at the meal said, well, you know, we move a ship every year from the East Coast to the West Coast through the Panama Canal. Would you like to go on that cruise? And I'm like, yes, I do. So they gave me a cruise on a 15-night cruise from Canaveral to LA. And I realized, wow, here's the 5th book. And then as I got on the cruise, I realized this is way too huge. This is the 5th and the 6th book. So in fact, the book that came out this year, my little button isn't working, but trust me, there was a book that came out this year, is the 6th, really the 2nd of the 2 cruise books, and it goes to the caves of Aruba. It goes through the Panama Canal, which was just the most amazing. I'm a techno freak, so just watching the engineering of moving this giant ship through the Panama Canals was amazing. And as it turned out, a relative of mine's father built the 3rd block of the Panama Canal. So it was also kind of a family thing to go through there and see this massive undertaking they had done a zillion years ago. And then it moves into the zip lines of Costa Rica, as does the book. And it goes into Mexico, and years ago, I would take a month every year and write in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. So I'm very familiar with that area of the world and some of the incredible temples and ruins there. And I worked that into the novel as well. And the 6th book kind of comes to a climax in this, you know, jungle craziness. And that left the final book to be written, book 7. So there I was, poised with my pen, outlining away, and thanks to you guys, and many, many more than you, I had received thousands of emails from ardent readers who really owned the series. And they owned it in a way I'm not sure I even owned it. People would write and say, I've read the first book 7 times. I've read the first book 11 times. I ran into a young woman named Brooke Mushat, who's here in the front row, and she had encyclopedia-ized all my novels, knew where there were problems in them, knew them better than I. And I realized, who am I to close this series without involving you guys? It seemed like, I mean, I had a book all ready to go, but it seemed kind of long. And so I spent over 18 months trying to figure out a legal way that I could have you write the book with me. And it's tricky because of copyright laws and various things, but I was really bound and determined to do this. And through a friend, I was introduced to this brilliant company out of Palo Alto called Colloquy Books. And Colloquy is an ebook publisher, but they are a bunch of brilliant engineers and creative people. And after several meetings with Colloquy, some in person and just some on Skype, we realized that my dream of having a lot of people help me could come true if they put their minds to it. And we came up with something called Kingdom Keepers Insider. And the Insider app, which is available at all the app stores, and there's also kingdomkeepers.com, allows people to come on and vote for who's going to be in this week's chapter, where the chapter is going to go, and they can contribute writing. And if I like what they've done, I actually cut and paste it into what will be the published book in April. So there are so far dozens of young writers and adult writers who will have a little footnote by their text. And in the back of the book, it'll say, this was Janice Stapleton who wrote that paragraph. So we have found a way for you to actually write the book with me. And for those of you who know the app, if you don't know the app and if you have a smartphone, you should download it as I'm talking. I'm not kidding, it's Kingdom Keepers Insider. And it's, you know, it's on the Mac, iBooks, or whatever that is, App Store, Google, all of those. Or if you just have a smartphone, you can go to this address, which I'm interrupting by walking across. There's only 5,000 letters in that address. We couldn't make it simple. Because we are having a D23 quest. And what you're supposed to do is get onto your phones right now. And if you have the app, you will know what to do. But there is a D23 icon in the menu, special for today. And I've posted some questions on there, and you can vote on them. And you can even write a sentence or two. And we're going to tell you in a few minutes how all that voting came out. And next week, the fan fiction entry on Kingdom Keepers Insider is going to be the one that is today, so it will feel very familiar to you. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Disney Kingdom Keepers Insider in a minute, but I wanted to bring you up to date on what we're doing in Book 7. The book opens with, are you familiar with the Disney archives? Yes. So how cool are they? And I could not overlook them. In fact, when Wendy and I first talked about the very first book, I said this series is ending at the Disney archives. So the 7th book starts, basically, at the Disney archives and an attack by the Overtakers, who seek information there. And it continues and brings the Kingdom Keepers out west, and off we go, running into the universe and into Disneyland. Now, how many of you know how many magic lanterns there are in Disneyland? Think about it. Any guesses?
46.
I saw your hand up. How many?
3.
Where are the 3?
There's the one in the bazaar.
One in the bazaar.
I don't remember where the others were.
There's one on canal boats.
There's one in the bazaar.
One in the bazaar.
One in Storybook Land.
One in Storybook Land.
And does California Adventure count? Like,
Nope, just Disneyland.
Yes.
I think those are the only 2. Does anybody know of a 3rd? No, I've been up there. In fact, Walt Disney's apartment is going to play a huge role in this 7th book, as will the guest suite. The apartment is very small. Have any of you ever been up to it? It's pretty cool, but it's really tiny, as is Wayne's apartment in Walt Disney World. But there's one particular piece of equipment in it that just immediately captured my eye, and is going to play a big role in this book and books to come. So the other place that we go to in Kingdom Keepers 7 is, anybody? Indiana Jones, which is a wonderfully creepy place, and hopefully when you read the book, you will never see it the same. Here's the guy that really fascinates me. Walt Disney created a character called Chernabog. And I believe he shows up in Fantasia in a big way. And the great thing as a writer is the Disney Imagineers and the Disney creative talent have never done a lot with Chernabog. Walt Disney said he was the most evil creature he had ever created. That he was said to eat humans to devour their souls. Now this is Disney, folks. And I went, yeah, that's my kind of guy, are you kidding me? So I've had the fun of kind of, in my mind, reimagining Chernabog. And he's grown from an idea early in the books to a very present force by the 6th book. And you will have to read on in 7. The other fun thing about the app that I should mention is is that in order to do this project as a collective, we have over 25,000 people each week working with us. I have to post the chapters online. And I took so much flack after writing book 5, where at the end a certain event happened that's called a cliffhanger. It turned out, I found out via email, people don't like cliffhangers. Some of the words that were sent to me were not pleasant words. So this time I thought, well, even if I leave a cliffhanger at the end of book 6, I can solve things by having book 7 immediately available. So on the app, when you sign up, you see screens like this, and you start going inside, and you get the opportunity via a set of menus to do a million things. You can go to the series and look at the various books that are in the series. You can even order them. You can go into book 7. You can go into the fan fiction area. You can send messages. You can read my blog where I tell you who's writing well and why they're writing well. All of this came out of a desire. I do a lot of speaking at schools, and I really want to bring reading and writing back because a lot of us have forgotten how to read and write. And I thought that something like this app gave us a great opportunity to read together, because I post a new chapter once or twice a week, and to write together. And that I could give feedback to the writers that are selected and say, this is really good, but maybe you have a little more texture, maybe a little less in the dialogue, maybe a few less adjectives, and we could actually work as a community to elevate our writing, and it has worked. For those of you who have been in the Insiders, if you've noticed, every week the writing has gotten stronger and stronger. We occasionally have a dip. Sometimes they actually let me choose the fan fiction challenge, and I choose the lamest ideas, and then nobody even wants to write it. And so then I say, okay, Lisa, Brooke, everybody else, you guys can pick it. But for the most part, when I'm left out of it, it's really been a fun project. So you get inside. I hope you're getting inside now and that you're already picking this D23 challenge. And you read the actual posting this week. You can go back and read. We've got over 120 pages of the next book published electronically. So you can catch up completely or not at all. And you can vote on, over in these panels, if I've got this right, we have choices, which is what we have today, too. And you just highlight one of those, write something, and submit it, and it pops up, and our little wizards that hide in caves ferret it out and read it. We read every single thing that's submitted. It's all, you know, Disney-proof, so there's no risk to kids. It's really just totally fun. So I hope, if you haven't already come to help me write the book, you will. There's about 8 to 10 weeks left for insider input, but I will continue, I believe, to post a lot of the book as I continue to write it. Another fun thing that we've done with Kingdom Keepers is we've created the Kingdom Keepers Quest. And inside the parks, again, because of my love of sort of reading and education, we've created, with the Youth Educational Services, the opportunity for school groups to go in and become the Kingdom Keepers. They get a language arts and math quest that I designed and wrote, and you have to get, just like the Stonecutter's Quill, you have to get the answers right or you can't move on. If you move on, you keep going through the park, and by the end you become a Kingdom Keeper. It became so popular that we got families screaming at us saying, well, what if we aren't a school group? So Disney was terrific and included a smaller version of the quest in the Birnbaum guides. So at the back of the 13 guides, both sizes, is a Magic Kingdom Keepers quest, and I believe it's just going to be in the big one in 14. In the one that's coming up in a couple months, the 14 guide, it'll be in just the big one, but it's actually 2 now. It's the Magic Kingdom and the Animal Kingdom. So before we get to questions, I've got a couple more things to tease you with. The first is, for those Kingdom Keepers insiders, everybody know what this is?
Yes.
World of Color. But it's basically a show, and in Kingdom Keepers 7, it becomes a ride. So I will just let that hang out there. And you know what this is? Skyway, the old Skyway. If you read on in Kingdom Keepers 7, you will discover that although it's an old Skyway, it's maybe not as old as you think. You can follow me. I'm not terribly interesting, but you can follow me on social media. And we have a lot of fun with that, and it's grown substantially over the last couple of years. We put contests on there. We give away things. We have a little Zazzle site where we have Kingdom Keepers t-shirts and stuff, and there's no greater thrill than me. Yesterday I was walking around Disneyland with Brooke and my assistant Nancy, and sure enough there was a person in a Kingdom Keepers shirt. I mean, you know, that's like a great moment. I started jumping around and looking like a complete idiot. I think now we're going to do the results of the challenge. Have any of you participated in this? Have any of you done it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? Do any of you need more time to do it? A little more time? Good, well I'll do a little, you know. What I will do is tell you about Peter and the Starcatcher. Peter and the Starcatchers is a 4-book series that talks about how a young boy became Peter Pan. Ah, we've got the votes up. Look at this. So this is what it looks like week to week after we've solicited, oh my gosh, look at that. Which Disney villain is currently undercover? It's Maleficent. That's pretty cool. And then here are the actual entries of, my gosh, they even have some votes already. You guys are amazing. And this is what we do, our little team. Every week we read all of these and vote them up and promote them, and then I go through them more and start analyzing them, and then eventually I write a piece. Yeah, here's an example of, ladies and gentlemen, prepare to bow down to me. I like that. That's Maleficent. That's reminiscent of Book 5, when Maleficent interrupts the cruise in the Walt Disney Theater on the cruise ship to say, honey, this ain't going to be your usual cruise, and then all the chandeliers fall on everybody. So, I hope you have as much fun with the Kingdom Keepers as I. It has been the most amazing experience, and people ask me about the first book, and especially the experience that I had in Small World. I was allowed into Small World at about 5 in the morning, 5:30 in the morning, and the ride was shut down. They had the cast members there to turn it on for me, and I asked that I be able to go through it with it shut down, and they said sure. So there was no colorful lighting. The dolls were all stopped, which was really creepy, and that obnoxious song was not playing. I was just clanking and clicking along in my little boat with an Imagineer as a guide. And we got to about the 3rd scene, and out of the corner of my eye, 2 of the frozen dolls stepped forward. And I jumped like 6 feet out of that boat. And when I came down, my guide said, what's with you? And I went, did you guys see that? And he said, Ridley, what? And I said, 2 of the dolls just moved. And he said, the ride is shut down. There's no way anything moved. And I said, dude, 2 of those dolls just moved. And I wrote down in my notebook, 2 of the dolls moved. And I went home, and I started to write a chapter about the 5 teenagers inside the park about 2 o'clock in the morning. They're being pursued by the overtakers. They're trying to solve this piece of a riddle. And they're inside Small World on a boat under this weird white lighting of emergency lighting. The dolls are all frozen, and 2 of the dolls moved. And then I backspaced and I said, no, 4 of the dolls moved. Well, at that time, I played in an all-authors rock band to raise money for charity with Dave Barry, Amy Tan, Greg Iles, Mitch Albom, and Stephen King. And I said, wait a second, I'm in a band with Stephen King, and I backspaced and I said, all of the dolls move. So that's how that scene ended up happening. Anyway, I've had a ton of fun doing these books, and because D23 is all about what's coming up. And because I get inundated with emails of, if this is the 7th book, what's next? So we have a D23 only announcement, which is what's next is a 3-book series called Keepers of the Kingdom. I used to go out at my book signings and I would say, how many of you, if I had to force you to take, the books were either going to be set inside the park or they were going to be the 5 characters, which would you vote for? And a number of hands would go up for set in the park, and a number of hands would go up for the characters, and it would be dead even. Everywhere I went, dead even. So I thought, oh my gosh, I don't want to write the same books. So how am I going to do this? And it's that same what if. What if there was an overtaker inside D23 intent on sabotaging our good time here? And I think the one hint I can give you for these 3 books that are coming is, what if, how would I put it? What if Back to the Future met the Da Vinci Code? That's the next series. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it. They've offered you the chance to ask some questions. I think there's some mics out. I'd love to have them. If you don't want to go to the mic, I can always repeat them. Yes, sir.
I loved Peter and the Starcatchers.
Oh, yeah.
I love Kingdom Keepers, too. I love Peter and the Starcatchers. Are you going to do anything more with that?
Yeah, the question is, he loves Peter and the Starcatchers, as do I. And he wanted to know, is there anything more that Dave and I are going to do with that? Disney, being Disney, and I happen to just love this company. I'm sure everybody here does, or we wouldn't be here. In all their wisdom, a guy named Tom Schumacher, who runs the theatrical wing of Disney and does all the wonderful Broadway shows, came to us early on and said, you know, Peter Pan started as a play with the great J.M. Barrie's writings, and isn't the proper place for it back on the stage? And so he proposed, and Dave and I agreed to have Disney Theatric attempt to develop Peter and the Starcatchers as a stage play. And boy, did they. It took 6 years. And in fact, one of the people, Clifford, is in the front row, who made this whole thing happen. How about a big hand for Clifford? Clifford ran this thing every night for about 4 years, 4.5 years. We first went to La Jolla and workshopped it. It was written by the great Rick Ellis, who did Jersey Boys, The Addams Family, a number of great plays. Rick wrote just a brilliant stage play. It went to La Jolla, where Clifford and his gang workshopped it and improved it on a daily basis. If you want to watch a wild process of writing, imagine yourself a playwright, and every night your play gets shown in front of a live audience, and 50 or 60 of those people stay afterwards and tell you what's wrong with it. And you go back to your hotel room, rewrite it that night, give it to the actors the next morning, and by the next night, it's different. They did that every night for 5 weeks and improved this thing to where it was just mind-blowing. They moved it to off-Broadway, where it extended 2 or 3 times. It was just a sensation. And it kind of earned its wings to go to Broadway. And Clifford and the gang took it to Broadway, and it won 5 Tonys. It is now playing off-Broadway again. It's doing phenomenally well. And it starts its national tour next week in Denver. I will be there. And we'll tour for 42 weeks around the country, including 6 weeks here in LA. It's just an amazing show. And in all of this, as it was going along, some other people within Disney went to Tom Schumacher and said, would you mind if we played around with this as well? And those other people were the live action studio. So the director of Hunger Games, Gary Ross, is directing Peter and the Starcatcher, and it will start shooting right after Christmas of this year, and will come out either holiday season of 2014 or just shortly thereafter. So we have had this amazing experience with Peter and the Starcatchers. We also wrote a book called Bridge to Neverland, which feeds off of Peter and the Starcatchers. But as far as Dave and I know, it stops there. We left Bridge to Neverland open so we could write another one. And, you know, maybe now that it'll be a movie, maybe Disney will ask us to write another book, but I don't know right now. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
My question is, since the theme parks are going to be involved in the next books, is there any chance they're going to go back to Disney World? Because it seems like there's lots of stories left, especially with New Fantasyland, because that brings a bunch of new overtakers in. And I bet the Evil Queen won't be very happy that her ride was closed to make room for a princess meet.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, I mean, I plan to do the next 3 books here in Disneyland. But because the heart of the novels is really started in Disney World, I'm sure pieces of that will always show up. But I am enamored with Disneyland. It's where it all began. Book 7 is going to focus on this in such a big way because the Overtakers, by returning to Disneyland, that's where they're really the most powerful. That's where they were created. So the Kingdom Keepers think they've seen these people powerful, these villains powerful. They have not. They're about to really ratchet that up. Yes?
For the 3 books that you're going to have, will Amanda and Jez be in these, or just the Kingdom Keepers?
Yeah, will the Fairleys be in the new books? I happen to be in love with Amanda. I have a real problem with this. Every time I write a scene with Amanda in it, I write about 9 pages and then have to cut it back to about 1.5. So I can't imagine that Jez and Amanda and other Fairleys will show up. At one point, Wendy and I talked about having an entire series written around the Fairleys. And maybe we'll do something like that and publish it 6 months off of a Kingdom Keepers book. But I love the Fairleys and their powers, and I think we've just scratched the surface of that storytelling. So I sure hope so. Thank you for that.
Hello. I know Disney has a rich history of villains, which you have to play off your protagonists. I like the original Disney villain, Pete, who goes back to the Alice comedies.
Ooh.
Do you see him as a role as an Undertaker?
I do now.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of thing we hope to get through the Insider app, is everybody participating and saying sort of, what about this, what about that, what about this, because that's what helps. I mean, as you know, it's such a huge realm that you can't know everything and you can't know it all, although Brooke does, just so you, in case you're wondering. But yeah, I mean, I'm always up for ideas. I think it's terrific. I think that's what this is all about. Yeah.
Hi. Well, first of all, I just want to say that, like, I really love your books. I've been, like, trying to follow up on all the books.
You have no idea what your guys coming here today means to me and things like that mean to me. You know, I spend 11 hours a day in my office writing these books, and on weekends I spend about 5 hours on Saturday and 5 hours on Sunday. And to have actual readers show up when there's a million things to do today, it touches me in ways you will never know. So thank you for that comment.
Yeah, and so like I've heard some rumors out in the open, like, would there be like a Kingdom Keepers movie?
I've heard those too.
Like, you think like could it be possible to?
If I had $80 million in my pocket, there would be.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, we have talked to the studios before. I never rule anything out. And this sounds very self-serving, and it is. But the truth of the matter is that for every 5 friends of yours you tell about the Kingdom Keepers, we get 5 steps closer to a movie.
Right.
Sadly, at the end of the day, so much of this comes down to the business of it. And you guys have done such an amazing job of growing the Kingdom Keepers. From a sort of a quiet little cult thing into a much more publicly accepted series and best-selling series. It's selling like it's never sold before. But that's only because you guys are nice enough to tell a friend, oh, you got to read this, oh, you got to have this. You tell your library, you got to have these books in here. You just don't know how that helps the whole thing. And I think Disney has already revisited the idea of at least testing if there would be some sort of market for a movie out there. So already what the success of 6 and what we call the backlist, the earlier books, it's already getting the interest of the company, but it's things like D23. The more noise you get within the company, the more people listen. So yeah, I sure hope so, but
at least you have one thing that's like comparative between you and Disney. You both have big dreams, and look where it's got you right now.
That's it. You gotta have big dreams.
Yeah. First off, I just want to say, like, I also really love books, and I think we all do. For me, personally, this is like my Disney-fied Harry Potter, so I'm going to be really sad when this ends and I have to wait for like
Me too.
My question is, for the next series, are you planning on having another app or something so we can participate in helping you write at least one of the books? Because I'd really love to do that.
I've just enjoyed the process so much. I can't imagine we won't do something. I talked to Lisa Rutherford, the head of the company, who's here today, and Wendy and I correspond all the time about how to increase the Kingdom Keepers insider world. And again, I think it comes down to what I was saying earlier. The more friends you tell about it, the more people we get on it, because it's been very, very popular, and it's just been so much fun to do this. Whether we might write a third of the book or a quarter of the book, I don't know. A lot of that will be Wendy's decision and sort of the business end of it, but I love the process. It's been eye-opening for me. And there are so many of you who are good writers out there. What's exciting to me about it is I have a 14 and a 16-year-old girl. And you know, in the third week of May, right at the time that everybody has spring fever, kids want to get in trouble. They just want to get in trouble. And on a Friday night in May, we had 1,700 kids, high schoolers and middle schoolers, submitting writing to us on a Friday night. They were staying home and writing. And that was so cool to me. So yeah, I hope we can keep doing this. For one thing, it's fun creatively to see everybody's ideas and to get their input. Some of the stuff that you guys vote for, that I just throw out there, I'll say, well, let's put that question in, and then that's the one you vote for, and I go, oh my gosh, now I have to make the story go that direction. So I mean, it's been really fun and informative for me, so I hope so.
Me too.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi.
My son's a big fan, so forgive me if I ask something obvious here, because I haven't started reading the series yet. Since you're going to be focused in Disneyland, are you going to include the Club 33? Anything about that?
Lisa, have we posted that yet? Yeah, it's like the next chapter that gets posted.
Nice.
Yeah. I had an amazing tour of that. Oh no, it's the one I'm writing right now. I was writing it on the plane out yesterday. I had an amazing tour here with Kim Irvine, who is the, I believe she's sort of, what's her technical thing so I don't blow this, but what's that? Well, she is an Imagineer, but I think she sort of is the style person of the entire park. And Kim got us in everywhere, including the guest residence, you know, the guest suite, and Walt's apartment, and even though it was under some construction at the time, into Club 33, and she showed us a thing in Club 33 that I'm writing about it right now, and I know half of you won't even believe it when you read it, but it's true! So yeah, it's going to be in there.
I like your Peter and the Starcatcher books. I was wondering if there's a sixth one.
There is not yet. You never know. You got to talk to this woman, pretty woman in the front row with the curly hair. We'll see. If there was a sixth one, I think it would be a continuation of Bridge to Neverland. I think we're probably not going to go. We had so much fun being in Peter's little worn-out shoes for those 4 books that I don't think we'll repeat that. But I do hear that if the movie is a success, they may try to do a good part of the whole series. So if the movie comes out, drag all your friends to it, because we need it to be a big success. Do we have time for a couple more? Maybe two more? Two more. One.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey.
So I'm a youth services librarian, and I always suggest your Kingdom Keepers to all the boys that are looking for something to read that doesn't scare them.
Thank you.
Yes. So now that the kids have grown up, I need something new for the middle schoolers.
Yes.
So are you going to be getting any new middle school kind of characters or books?
Have you run them by the Steel Trap books?
I have not.
Okay, I have two books in the series that I want to have more books in, Wendy, that are called Steel Trap. It's about a boy with photographic memory. I don't know if you're aware of it. There actually are people you can say, where were you in 2008, May 18th at 10 in the morning, and they can tell you everything about where they were, what was on the signs, what was on the menu. So he's one of these kids, and there are two books in that series, and that is right now in the very early stages of development for television.
Awesome.
So, yeah, try those. Yes, sir.
Well, I just would first like to say I'm a huge fan of the books. I've been a fan since 8th grade and going into my sophomore year of college.
Yeah.
I read the books like all the time.
I so appreciate that.
Of course. So my question is, because I go read about the books online a lot. Are you planning on having like any other newer like Disney villains come in book 7, like Hades, or you have an Ursula plan to come back or something? Or...
Yes.
Yeah,
I've really debated the Hades thing.
Yeah.
It's tricky because there's this guy named Rick Riordan who wrote these, I mean, he wrote some books you might have heard of.
Of course, yes.
And because he deals with Hades so often, I felt like, yeah, I don't know that I can go there. But he's such a cool character that, I'd like to. But the other character that you mentioned just might have a really big part of book 7.
Wonderful. So, yeah, I'm going to continue to be a big fan.
I so appreciate that.
Of course. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for coming.